Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to our webinar. The focus today is on levelling up. So last year, as I'm sure you will all know, the government confirmed that they would be launching a levelling up fund. The details of that, including the criteria and the application process, we don't yet know. But I think what we can say for certain is that the concept of levelling up is much more than just a fund. It's a broad ambition to reduce inequalities between and within regions. But because of the lack of detail, I think it's fair to say that levelling up is currently a blank canvas on which everybody is painting their own picture. But there is enough information for you to start planning and to start thinking about what your application to the Levelling Up Fund might look like. So before we get started, we should introduce ourselves. So my name is Andrew Laird and I'm the Managing Director of Mutual Ventures. Mutual Ventures are working with Cadence, Innova and Project Centre, and we formed a partnership to support local areas to develop and deliver levelling up projects. And at Mutual Ventures, our particular expertise is on the development of business cases and on the people and public service reform side of levelling up. Bharati, can I hand over to you to introduce yourself, please?
Hello, everybody. My name is Bharati Ghodke. I'm an Associate Director at Project Centre. Project Centre is a leading streetscape design, engineering, and landscape architecture consultancy with offices in London, Brighton, Slough, Ashford, Manchester, and Edinburgh. We offer a range of services which are focused on providing our clients with the very best in terms of planning, design, and engineering solutions. We also carry out consultations and manage procurement and supervise work on site to ensure the best end results. So,
thank you. Thank you. We will also be joined by Jane Barrett, who is the founding partner of Cadence Innova, but Jane unfortunately has been held up, but will join us shortly. So just do some housekeeping elements now. So we are recording this and we will be sharing it on email and on LinkedIn, etc. So there's no need to take copious notes or try and record it yourself. We will have time at the end for questions, but you can submit questions at any time using the Q&A function, and we will collect those and try and get through as many of them as we can. We have a lot of attendees, so unless you're a panelist, unfortunately, you won't be seen or heard. So the only way that you can communicate with us is through the Q&A function. So do please try and use that. So if we just run quickly through our agenda, we'll first of all talk about what we know about levelling up, what information is out there so far. Then we will talk about what the key elements of a strong bid would be. Then Bharati will talk us through some examples of potential projects, and these are real case studies. And then the final thing that we want to leave you with is some of the key things to be thinking about right now. And then we'll have some time for questions and discussion, and then we'll talk about next steps. So it is our intention that this is the first of a number of webinars. The next one coming when we have a bit more detail on what the Levelling Up Fund process is. So let's have a little look at what we know so far. So I think if you've heard anything from politicians over the past year, apart from COVID response, it's probably been about levelling up. So this is likely to be the key driving force for the government's domestic agenda, and their flagship will be the Levelling Up Fund. It is very much focused on reducing inequalities, but what some of the rhetoric has certainly been about is a change in mindset from central government from focusing on resolving inequalities within regions to actually investing in specific regions. Now that hasn't been confirmed yet, and there is a lot of debate in the newspapers and from different politicians about what the appropriate way of addressing inequalities is. But at the minute, looking at what the politicians are saying right now, it is about investing in particular regions. The fund over its lifetime will be 4 billion, including 600 million of that for this coming year. and it is designed to support regions and cities and towns with both the physical infrastructure projects, but also community infrastructure and social infrastructure projects. So things like libraries, things like public service reform, as well as roads and railway stations. The full prospectus for the fund and the first rounds of bidding are expected in early 2021. That's what we were told before Christmas. So I would imagine we will probably see something around the time of the budget. Local areas are going to be able to apply for projects up to the value of 20 million each from the fund, and these would need to command local support. Now, it has been said that a local MP would need to support it as well. That has yet to be confirmed, but with any project like this, as broad a range of support from local stakeholders is always a very good idea. What's not clear at the minute is if areas club together, whether that £20 million limit can be expanded. So that again is something that we'll be watching very closely when the detail of the fund comes out. In terms of who manages the fund, it's managed jointly by the Treasury, Department of Transport, and the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. So one of the things that we will advise later is if you have contacts and have connections with any of those ministries, it is a good idea now to start warming those up. The projects need to have real impact, and by real impact, it means something that can be demonstrated really within this Parliament. This is a very key ambition of the government with this fund. And then the final point is that the government's guidance on bidding for public money, which is known as the Green Book, has been updated to support the levelling up agenda. So this was updated just before Christmas. One of the things that we'll share with you after this webinar is our guidance on those changes. So that's something that I'm going to talk about in a bit more detail. But the Green Book guidance is a pretty detailed guide on the Treasury's 5-case business case model, and changes have been made to that to enable areas that maybe haven't traditionally received public funding to be in a better position to do so. So I want to move on now just to talk about what some of the key elements of a strong bid are. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but one of the key changes that the Green Book made was that any bid must have a very clear link to an overarching government priority. So this is having that clear connection between what the national government are saying they want to achieve and your local program and then individual projects. So it has to have that clear link. And one of the reasons that the Green Book guidance was updated was that the Treasury were seeing a lot of business cases where the strategic element of it was quite weak. So that is one of the major changes which has been made. Moving across, the bids should be ambitious. And another one of the changes to the Green Book guidance was that the need for the benefits that are being outlined to be readily monetizable was actually leading to bids which had projects which were not as ambitious as they could be, were in some cases quite marginal. So there's a very clear guidance now to be ambitious in what your project and program is trying to achieve. And whilst the benefits being monetizable are very important, if you're going for something truly transformative and it's very difficult to actually monetize the benefit, don't let that put you off to actually include those really stretching benefits at the same time. Obviously, local consultation and support is really important. And this is engaging with the public. This is engaging with your public sector partners and the community and voluntary sector, but also with local MPs. So that whole consultation and having a real coalition of support behind your bid is going to be incredibly important. Like any bid for government funding, if you can show that you intend to or can already access additional funding, whether that's from other agencies or from the private sector, then that always strengthens a bid. So the whole concept of match funding, or the government saying that they're putting in some investment and you as a local area are drawing investment from elsewhere, also that always strengthens a bid. It's important to demonstrate how it will support people, communities, and economic development. This seems obvious, but quite often bids into central government, particularly Treasury, overly focus on just economic benefits. It's really important that this shows how your projects will support people and support levelling up, not just in terms of infrastructure, but in terms of developing people as well, and supporting public services, which is the main engine of doing that. Like any good business case, it's really important to explain what the downside is if you didn't do this project, and why other alternatives to either getting funding or other types of projects won't achieve the same thing. That's really important to be clear on. Like any business case, robust financial and funding modeling is really critical. Remembering that the Treasury is one of the departments looking at this. They will have a very keen eye on the finances and ensuring that they are A, correct, B, ambitious, and C, that there's a good return on investment as well. One of the comments that the review of the Treasury Green Book, which led to the changes, one of the key comments there was that the business cases had tended to get very complicated and quite hard to unpick in terms of what the message was within it. So bearing in mind that the people reading your application or a business case are human beings who like to have their imagination captured as much as anything else, it's important that these should be straightforward, clear, precise, and easy to read. I mentioned earlier that there are 3 government departments who are leading on this. So if you have relationships there, now would be the time to start warming those up, I would say. And I think as you go through the bidding process, that open line of communication with those central government departments will be really important. And then finally, what the government will want to see is, once you put in a bid, it might be the best idea, but there needs to be a very clear commitment to implementing the idea if it's funded. And that has to come across really clear in the management case, which I'll talk about in a second on the next slide. So, can move on, please. So now, I'm sure all of you will be familiar with the Treasury's 5-case model, but just to talk you briefly through what that looks like. So the first case is the strategic case. So that is where you make the argument that there is a compelling case for change. So why does your local area need this project and need this funding? And then referring back to that Green Book change, you need to demonstrate within this case that there is a really clear link to a national government priority. And the review of business cases which led to the changes in the Green Book highlighted the fact that, generally speaking, strategic cases have been very weak. And what that has meant is that assessors have overly prioritized a cost-benefit analysis rather than the link with an overarching strategic objective. So really important that your strategic case is strong and has that clear link to what central government is trying to achieve. The economic case is where your benefit analysis sits. So this is where you would analyze, list out using benchmarks, what the different benefits that you would hope to achieve from the project are. And it's where you demonstrate that this is a really good use of public money and will deliver public value for money. And this is where you will consider being as ambitious and transformative as you can. Some of the projects which will be funded through Levelling Up won't be easily monetizable in terms of benefits. So if you're going for something really transformative, try and gather as much evidence, as many benchmarks as you can to show that there will be a benefit, even if it's quite difficult to directly link that to a cash saving or a monetizable benefit. The commercial case is where you get into the detail of how you will actually put the partnerships in place, which will be needed. So will there be elements of procurement needed in order to bring partners in? Will you need to build different relationships? So in this case, assessors will really want to see that you have thought about all of the different partners that you will need to deliver the project successfully, and also that you know what your route to engaging those partners is as well. The financial case then is very much as it says on the tin. This is where you take a look at what the project will cost, you take a look at what returns it will generate, and you develop that into a financial model. And then finally, and this links back to the final point on the last page about making sure that the project is actually deliverable. This is where we look at the management case. So how are you intending to actually make this happen? Do you have the resources in place on the ground to get it done? Do you have the partnerships in place? Do you have a really strong project manager? Do you have a project management team? How will you manage risks? Have you clearly identified those? Every program, particularly ones of the size we're talking here, will have risks associated with it. And any government department funding this type of project will want to know that those risks have been identified and managed. And then critically, what is the exit strategy? How does the project get closed down, and how do you actually know when it's been successfully delivered? It's really important because sometimes large projects can just drift endlessly. So it's really important that there is an end point there as well. So on this, we're going to be sharing some resources. So we've produced a guide on the changes to the Treasury Green Book, which is available, and we will send out along with the link to the recording and the slides afterwards. We're also producing some tutorial information on how to put together a really strong business case. So I'm going to hand over to Bharati now to take us through some potential project ideas to hopefully get you thinking about what your own project could be. So Bharati, over to you.
Hello, hi there. So I'm going to talk about the different project ideas, possible ones. Obviously, different types and scales of projects could be delivered through this Levelling Up Fund. And we've identified 3 examples where we've helped local authority clients from developing the business case through to delivering them on site. The first example, if you could go to the next slide. The first example is Strood Town Centre. This is a town centre regeneration scheme in Medway, southeast of England. It was found that there was a need to reduce traffic congestion, improve journey time reliability, and at the same time renew and refresh the public realm and the retail environment within this town centre. So in the first instance, a business case was developed, and this secured 9 million of the local growth fund. We then developed proposals through various design stages and supported the council through the construction stage as well. We carried out extensive stakeholder consultations during the design process to ensure local buy-in. This scheme has created a safer and more accessible town center for residents as well as businesses, and has delivered focused public realm improvements and has created a sense of place. Um, it has led to economic growth. It's led to new jobs, improved connectivity, and improved air quality as well through better managed traffic, many street trees and green areas. Our Going on to the next one, we've got a highways improvement scheme as the next example. This is a Stone Ferry Road in Hull, uh, which is a extremely congested 3 kilometer long road that is critical to Hull's economic vitality. This scheme aims to mainly reduce congestion by increasing network capacity, and especially at peak periods. Uh, 11 million pounds was secured through a business case that was approved through the LEP gateway process, following which we provided the full range of technical services that were needed to deliver this scheme to program. So we also carried out, again, extensive engagement with resident groups to ensure their concerns were taken on board during the design process. Currently, this scheme is in its construction stage, and it's using local subcontractors to deliver it. So that's providing local jobs. And if we could go to the next one. The third one is rather interesting. This is the upgrade of Lee Bridge Road in Waltham Forest, London, through Transport for London's Mini Holland program, which was a program that focused on improving walking and cycling through London boroughs. For this scheme, 17 million pounds funding was successfully won from the Mini Holland program. And I think this was way back in 2014 or 2013 or so. This scheme has not only made walking and cycling more attractive and convenient in this area of London, but it has also relieved traffic congestion. It has transformed the look of that road into a thriving high street with business opportunities. And it has created new and improved public spaces for the community. And also it has also delivered several complementary measures, which include around 400 new cycle stands, for instance, and several residential cycle hangars, which were the first of their kind in this particular borough. And as it also included cycle training for more than 1,000 school children and around 400 adults to get them cycling more. It has been an extremely successful scheme and is currently used as best practice for LTNs. It ticks several boxes in terms of government priorities, and these include high street regeneration, public transport improvements, and increase in active travel with an increase in cycle usage by 103%, reduction in car usage by 7%. And the highlight, obviously, is the air quality improvements and the environmental benefits gained through this scheme. Through modal shifts and through the planting of 197 new trees, as well as the return of 1,800 square meters of ex-highways land to Epping Forest. So obviously, it's contributing well towards the government's net zero agenda. So these are our three example schemes, and I'll hand over to Andrew to take us through the key things to be thinking about in terms of the Levelling Up Fund. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you very much. So in terms of what to think about, many of you may have existing or live applications in with the Towns Fund. So it could well be that if you're unsuccessful with those, there's an opportunity here to recycle some of those projects. But I'm sure you all have ideas that you've been working on or would have that you could access and could easily turn into a bid. So it's really about, in the first instance, not reinventing the wheel if you don't have to. And then I think it's really important to think about public service reform as well as physical infrastructure. So whilst it's important to think about roads, railway stations, improvements like that, the rhetoric around this fund and about the levelling up agenda more generally is not just about the physical infrastructure, but about people as well. So that's where public services come into play. And I would expect to see applications coming forward which have a public service reform element included, as well as a physical infrastructure element. And just to give you an example of what that might look like, it could be to do with a local library or a community hub, which, as well as being a physical thing, would have a public service reform element to it as well. Then the next point is that it is really never too early to start conversations with partners, and you may well already be in conversation with partners. So get talking to people, build that coalition, including within the council, other public sector partners, the voluntary sector, the private sector, your local MPs. Get that conversation going and get a real swell of support behind your idea. And start to think as well, if you remember what I was saying about what makes a strong bid, if you can get additional funding that you can bring to bear, then that always strengthens it. So it's never too early to start thinking about that either. And then finally, this isn't going to be a simple project. You're going to need the capacity and the skills in place to both develop your idea, complete the bid, business case, but then also deliver the project as well. So particularly if it's ambitious and transformative, you will need that capacity in place. So we can move on to questions now. So we've had some questions come in. So what I'm going to do is take us through those. And the first one is, what's the best way to start engaging with key stakeholders at this stage, and who should we engage with? So Jane, I thought you could pick that one up.
Sure. Yeah, sure. And sorry, I had a few technical issues getting on. I just got on just after 11. So hello, everyone. My name's Jane. I'm founder and partner of Cadence Innova. I think from our experience, really getting to as many key stakeholders as early as possible is going to be key. Bharati talked about the Mini Holland project, which actually Cadence and Project Centre were both involved with. I think Bharati would agree that early engagement with those stakeholders was absolutely key to ensure that that project was a success. And so I think you're not just looking at the internal stakeholders or indeed your councillors and management, but actually the people it's going to affect. From what we've learned so far, and as Andrew said, it is very early days at the moment, some of these projects, they are going to be looking at how they have positive impact on localities which have been impacted, for example, by the recent COVID. So I think get out and engage with as many people as possible. I don't know whether anyone else from the panel wanted to add to that.
Nothing for me, but Bharati, did you want to come in with anything there?
I think Jane has picked up, early engagement is extremely important, and especially when you are working with for local residents, for instance, and it's extremely important that you get that buy-in and you understand what their requirements are as well at that early stage of design and going forward as well.
Great.
Yeah.
So next question, are projects like Mini Holland, where there are multiple benefits, both economic, environment, social, are they likely to be more successful? Bharati, do you want to pick up on that one?
Yes, I think the detailed criteria is yet to be published, but however, from what we know, from what ministers have said, and from recent changes that I think Andrew has picked up upon, there is an emphasis on environmental, social impact as well as the economic benefits. And particularly, I would think environmental impact, especially considering the government's net zero agenda. So yes.
Yeah. No, I would entirely agree with that, that the benefits need to be much more broadly set than just economic benefits. And as you rightly pick up, economic, but also social as well. Jane, did you want to come in at all?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Andrew, because obviously you talked about the changes in the Green Book. I thought that might be a good point to just add, because I think some of those changes are reflecting that kind of multifaceted approach.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. So one of the key changes to the Green Book was in response to the fact that the Treasury gets a lot of bids that are just about monetizable benefits and economic benefit, and actually what the government see leveling up as being about, it is about people, and it is about the social impact of projects as well, and creating that social infrastructure rather than just the physical infrastructure. So thinking much more broadly than just purely economic benefits is going to be really important, and I would imagine will form part of the key criteria for the fund. Yeah. So another question has come in: is the application process likely to involve the development of a full 5-case model? So we don't know that actually, but what we know for sure is that the principles of the 5-case model, which are within the Treasury Green Book, will be extremely important. Now, whether the application process requires you to go through the full Treasury business case process, we don't yet know, but the themes, the elements, the emphasis of it will all be extremely important. So we're all waiting to see what that criteria looks like. And just a few questions that are coming in now. There's quite a few on just how long the fund will run for, who will be eligible to bid. From my understanding, from what the Chancellor said last year, it runs for this Parliament. So there's another 4 years, I think, left in that, a little bit under. And there's certainly 4 billion in total, with 600 million available this year. So it is over a number of years. In terms of who will be eligible to bid, that hasn't been clearly defined yet, but you would imagine councils would certainly play a large role in that, but it hasn't been made clear that other government agencies or indeed private sector organisations or voluntary sector organisations aren't able to lead bids. So that is unclear as yet, but watch this space and we will try and bring additional information as and when that comes.
Andrew, just
yes.
on that point, because some people, obviously, we've been talking to it, as you know, some people have been asking around the difference between the return on investment versus the parliamentary, as you've said, cycle. So I was just wondering, given that you guys are the business case specialists, whether you had any comments on that, because it's starting to come through quite a bit at the moment.
And this is particularly, Jane, about the, sorry.
So because obviously some infrastructure projects, the return on investment takes a lot longer than the parliamentary cycle. So I was just wondering whether you could just, from your business case specialism experience, just give a bit of comment on that, because I've been asked a few questions around that.
Yeah, no, I think that is, so sorry, but apologies, Jen. I think that is a really good question.
Yeah.
The rhetoric that is being used, and certainly what the Chancellor said before Christmas, is that these projects need to be realising their benefits before the end of this Parliament. So that will obviously put into close focus projects that are looking like they might take all of that time or maybe even longer to start realizing benefits. I'm not sure as yet exactly what that will mean, but putting that alongside the £20 million cap on individual projects, which would suggest that they might be a little smaller in terms of physical infrastructure projects and should be achieved within that time frame. Yeah, it does certainly seem that the government want to see the benefit of these projects before the next election, I think is fair to say.
Yeah, I think that's quite an important point, isn't it? It's not the longer term major infrastructure. From what we know so far, it appears to be more how the benefits can be realised within the next, say, 3 years, for example.
Yeah, I think that's right. So we've got another question here. Will government provide a clear statement of its overarching priorities in its prospectus? Absolutely. I would say so. They should come forward with very clear criteria on how they will assess bids, because it will have to be it'll have to be evidenced, and it will have to be fair. And I think there will be a lot of scrutiny around that as well. So I would certainly expect that to be made very clear, and we will see at that point whether everything that different people have said adds up to what is actually published when the prospectus for the fund comes out. I don't know if anybody wanted to add anything on that. Okay.
No, not from me. I think we're hearing the informal stuff, but I think we need to wait to see what government comes out with. But what we are hearing is there will be some quite specific criteria.
Yeah. A good question here. Do you know if the fund will include capacity building? And I'm guessing that means that, as well as the actual funding of the project itself, support to actually put the bid together and deliver the project. So again, that's not clear as yet, but it certainly would reflect what some other government funding programs have done if there is an element of capacity building included, particularly as I know a lot of councils that we work with may struggle to find capacity within their current setup to actually devote to both the development of the bid and then the delivery of the actual project. So really good question, but unfortunately we don't know yet. But I think if you've got connections and you can influence people, I think that is something that we're certainly trying to encourage.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, Andrew, and obviously we're all working in partnership, but one of the observations we've been talking about is the feedback we're getting from councils just about their internal capacity at those kinds of levels where they normally bid for these things. And it seems to be something that which is repeating within different local authorities. There, whilst this money is going to become available, people are worried about how they're going to bid for it in terms of their internal capacity.
Yeah, yes. Okay, there's a good question here about will councils or areas be able to club together to fund larger projects which cross boundaries? I think this is a really interesting question, and I know for sure that areas like Greater Manchester are engaging with Treasury and with central government on this. Obviously, if you consider somewhere like Greater Manchester or the West Midlands or any region really, investment in transport infrastructure, for instance, will usually benefit more than one council. And we know that areas like Greater Manchester are are engaging as a group on leveling up, as well as perhaps engaging individually on smaller projects. So again, we wait and see what happens there, but my expectation would be that we'll see a bit more of the detail on this in the budget, which is coming up in the next couple of weeks. Let's see now. Question here, you've only given examples of public realm and roads, for example. Is that reflective of government priorities? What about housing and town centres, etc.? Bharati or Jane, do you want to take that one?
I think Bharati gave some town centre examples, so maybe Bharati, if you want to start.
We did this crude example that I gave, for instance, was regarding town center regeneration, and so the examples we've picked were kind of touching upon the a highway style town center and going down to the neighborhood level. So I think it should be it in terms of housing intensification. Andrew or Jane, would you have something to say about that?
Yes, so we're involved in affordable housing in some local authorities at the moment. I think going back to Andrew's point, we need to see what the priorities are coming out. These are just examples we've given from our partnership. I would suspect that government will set the priorities for this fund in parallel with some of the other priorities they have set, for example, affordable housing. But at the moment, we don't know. I think it will be around, if you want my personal view, I think it will be around the regeneration of areas, especially ones affected post-COVID. So we await to see what comes out of government. Andrew, I don't know whether you want to add anything to that.
No, I think that about covers it. There's a good question here around somebody's asking if we can provide a matching service with councils. So if you're, I think this is an organization with an idea, and obviously depending on how the application process works, they might need to connect up with the council. I think we'd be really interested in exploring that. So if you want to get in touch with us, we can see where you are and what sort of contacts we have around that area, because I think there is a bit of brokering to be done there, because this is not just, because this isn't going to be something that a council can probably do on its own. So it's going to need local partners. So yeah.
I think that's a really good observation, Andrew, actually. And I would hope one of the benefits of this fund is to bring out stuff like that, because it is all about, God, without sounding a bit weird, it is all about leveling up, isn't it? So there's got to be that kind of tier 2 benefit to this as well.
Yeah. Good question here. The focus on benefits in this parliament would tend to focus minds on shovel-ready, inverted commas, projects. What does the panel think? So Bharati or Jane, do you want to come in on that one?
So did you say shovel-ready?
Yes, so ready to go, I guess.
Yeah, so I know from personal conversations I've been having, and we've been talking within this partnership as well, there is that kind of, because we're still waiting to hear, are they actually going to just tick the boxes for projects which have already been maybe through the first few phases, Andrew and Bharati, but I don't know. I can only kind of reflect on all the consultation we've done, both with central and local governments. I just don't think we know at this stage, so it's probably not a great answer. But Bharati, do you want to add anything?
Perhaps it might depend on the scale of the project, which is shovel-ready, and also considering that they do want to see the benefits within a certain time period. So there may be an advantage there, but obviously we don't know at this stage.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a key point. I mean, it's they do want to see the benefit within this parliament. So, you know, I don't see there being a huge appetite for a project that has a long lead-in planning time and will require a lot of work before it gets going. So, I think that's probably just the realism of it. Question around just things like that would focus on culture, like libraries and community centres. They have absolutely been mentioned in the Chancellor's speech before Christmas. He specifically talked about those types of things. So this, yeah, like we said before, it's not just roads, it's not just railway stations. It is community and cultural things as well, which I think are going to be really important. And if you think of things like Mini Holland, that is not only economically beneficial, but very socially beneficial as well, and very environmental also. So that's, you know, that's a really good example of a project which actually facilitates a lot of things.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think that, Andrew, I think that's two really key points. You know, we only know what we know so far, but that social and environmental aspects seem to be coming through everyone we're talking with, and just listening and observing to some of the questions that we've had today, which is been really interesting. I do think that social and environmental aspect, potentially rather than the longer term big infrastructure projects, is something I'll probably take away from today's questions and comments, and thinking back to the people we've spoken about. You know, it is about this parliamentary session, isn't it? And it feels like so far those type of projects will be the ones that will most benefit.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. So what I'm going to do, actually, I'm going to draw us to a close, and we've had quite a lot of questions. So there are some, and I want to give people a little bit of time back, because I'm quite conscious that we all have these Zoom meetings which run right up against the hour, and nobody has time to actually get themselves arranged for their next meeting. So there are some additional questions there. So what we're going to do is gather the unanswered questions. We'll do a short Q&A paper, which we will distribute along with a link to the recording and our slides, and then also some of the business case resources which I talked about earlier. We would be absolutely delighted to have continuing conversations with any of you who have ideas, whether you're a council or not. We'd be delighted to meet with you, offer a pro bono workshop to help you flesh out an idea, to think about what the challenges are, how it could best be presented. Be very happy to do that. So you'll see our contact details on the last slide. If we can just flick to that. Please do absolutely get in touch. And then the final thing to say is that this is the first in a series. Now, we don't know a huge amount about what the fund application process will be, or what the criteria will be. So this is intended to be the first in a number of webinars. The next one we would intend to do once the detail of the Levelling Up Fund comes out, and when we know criteria, when we know what the process is, and then we'll be in a position to paint a much richer picture for you. But we wanted to do this one up front in order to get everybody thinking about it, because the thinking, regardless of the exact process or exact criteria, will be the same. We do know enough at this point for you to start planning, to start thinking, and start engaging with partners. So it's really important that you do that. And as I said earlier, we're really happy to join that conversation with you and help you in any way we can. So on that note, I will wrap up and say thank you very much to you all.